Imagine this. You're sitting in a small, windowless room. A single light bulb flickers above you. Your hands are tied behind your back. The smell of sweat and cigarette smoke hangs in the air. You can hear footsteps coming closer, slow, deliberate, confident. A door opens, and in walks a man wearing a suit with a police badge clipped to his belt. He doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten. He just looks at you and says, "We can make this easy, or we can make this hard." Then, someone plugs in a small black box. A soft buzzing sound fills the room, and that's the moment you realize they're not here to ask questions. They're here to break you. This wasn't a movie scene. It was Chicago. Real people, real torture, real power abused in the name of justice. And the man behind it all was a detective named Jon Burge. Jon Graham Burge. To many, he was a hero, a former U.S. Army soldier who served in Vietnam, known for his discipline and courage under fire. When he joined the Chicago Police Department in 1970, everyone said he was the future of law enforcement, tough, effective, a man who got results. But beneath the sharp uniform and military posture, there was something darker, something he brought home from the war. Burge served as a military policeman during Vietnam. He learned interrogation techniques, how to make prisoners talk. He saw and allegedly practiced electric shock torture on captured soldiers. And when he came home, he didn't leave those methods behind. He brought them to the streets of Chicago. By the late 1970s, Burge was a rising star in the CPD's Area 2 Violent Crimes Division, a place where solving a case quickly meant everything. Murders, robberies, assaults. The pressure was enormous. Burge promised quick confessions, and he delivered. One after another, suspects broke down and confessed to their crimes. His record looked perfect. He became a legend. But there was one problem. Many of those confessions were fake. Behind closed doors, Burge and a small group of officers ran what would later be called a torture ring. Their victims were almost always young black men from poor neighborhoods, men with little power, little money, and no one to believe them. Once taken into custody, they'd be isolated for hours, sometimes days, without food, water, or legal counsel. And then the torture began. Victims described being punched, kicked, suffocated with plastic bags. But the most infamous tool was the black box, a small hand-cranked generator with wires that ended in metal clips. They'd attach it to a man's ears, fingers, genitals, and send electricity coursing through his body until he screamed, until he broke, until he said what they wanted to hear. If he didn't, they'd turn the dial higher. Some were burned, some passed out. All were changed forever. One victim said Burge looked calm while it happened, like he was conducting business. Another said Burge smiled. He called it Vietnam-style interrogation. For years, no one questioned him. Judges accepted the confessions, prosecutors celebrated the convictions, and the press printed stories of how the Chicago police were cleaning up the streets. Behind that image, a system of racism and violence thrived in silence. Then came Andrew Wilson. In 1982, 2 Chicago police officers were killed during a traffic stop. The department went into chaos. Everyone wanted the killers caught, fast. Wilson, a black man, was arrested as one of the suspects. He denied it, but under Burge's command, he was taken into interrogation. When he came out, his body was covered in burns and bruises. He could barely stand. Doctors confirmed he'd been electroshocked. Wilson filed a complaint claiming torture by the police, and for the first time, someone listened. Still, it took years for the truth to surface. The department denied everything. Burge called the allegations ridiculous. He said the criminals were lying to get sympathy. And for a while, it worked. He kept his badge, kept his rank, and kept torturing. But something had changed. Lawyers, journalists, and activists began to dig deeper. Over time, more and more victims came forward. Their stories were eerily similar. Same black box, same type of shocks, same man in charge. Patterns formed. Dozens of names, then hundreds. By the early 1990s, over 100 men had accused Jon Burge and his team of torture. Still, internal investigations dragged on. The code of silence within the Chicago Police Department protected its own. Superiors knew but said nothing. Files went missing. Evidence disappeared. It wasn't until 1993, more than 20 years after the first known case, that Burge was finally fired. But even then, he wasn't charged with torture, because under Illinois law, the statute of limitations had expired. He walked away, free, retired, with his pension. To the victims, it felt like the system was laughing in their faces. They'd been beaten, shocked, humiliated, and now the man who did it was sitting on a beach in Florida, collecting his retirement checks. But they didn't stop fighting. In the late 1990s, lawyers representing men on death row began to uncover shocking links between Burge's confessions and wrongful convictions. Innocent men had been sentenced to die based on lies beaten out of them. Some spent decades in prison. Some never made it out. The movement grew louder. Organizations like the People's Law Office and the Chicago Tribune's investigative team exposed the depth of the corruption. They published photos, testimonies, and documents. Burge's name became infamous. The city could no longer ignore it. Then came 2008. Federal prosecutors, not the local ones, finally charged Jon Burge, not with torture, but with perjury and obstruction of justice for lying under oath about the torture. It wasn't the charge victims wanted, but it was finally accountability. In court, Burge denied everything. He said the stories were exaggerated, that he'd been made a scapegoat for the system. But the evidence and the testimonies were overwhelming. Victims described the same methods, the same room, the same man. Doctors confirmed electric burns. Officers who'd served under him broke the silence. And in 2010, Jon Burge was found guilty. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in federal prison. 4.5 years for decades of torture, for destroying hundreds of lives, for turning the badge, a symbol of protection, into a weapon of fear. Even behind bars, Burge never admitted guilt. He claimed he was innocent until the day he died. But the truth had already won. Over 100 victims were eventually exonerated or released. The city of Chicago was forced to pay tens of millions of dollars in settlements. In 2015, the city took an unprecedented step. It issued a public apology to the survivors of police torture. And for the first time in American history, a U.S. city created a reparations fund specifically for victims of police violence. They also added the story of Burge's crimes into Chicago's public school curriculum so that students would learn what happens when power goes unchecked. It's estimated that between 1972 and 1991, Jon Burge and his men tortured at least 120 black men in Chicago. Some were convicted of crimes they never committed. Some served life sentences. Some died in prison, never seeing justice. And here's the hardest part to accept. Burge wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom, a reflection of how far a system can rot when no one dares to question it. Behind every one of his victims was a judge who signed the papers, a prosecutor who ignored the bruises, a journalist who never asked why every confession looked the same. The real horror wasn't just what Burge did in those rooms, it was how many people helped him get away with it. Burge was released from prison in 2014. He lived quietly in Florida until 2018, when he died of natural causes. He died free, but his legacy still hangs over Chicago like a shadow. Ask anyone from the South Side, they'll tell you the name Burge still means fear, still means injustice. It's a reminder that monsters don't always hide in dark alleys. Sometimes they wear badges, hold authority, and convince the world they're heroes. For decades, Chicago's police motto was, "We serve